Welcome, everyone. I thought, what better way to go live
Point of clarification, Your Honor, I apologize. I
than do a
referred
court
to Hoover
case?
as Exhibit 77, it's Exhibit 73, so I apologize for that mistake.
Still
Your
learning.
Majesty, I don't have any further questions for you. Thank you very much for your time. I believe defense counsel may have.
I'm still learning StreamYard, so I thought this would be a good way
Thank
to practice.
you.
Good afternoon. I'm Caroline Smith, and I do have a few questions for you, and let's start with the tools, okay? Where do you keep your tools?
I have some by the back door on a rack, and then I have some put away in a little storage unit that I made that's on wheels in my, off the side of the dining room area.
Okay, so that's in your some are in the apartment, some are out?
No, they're both in the apartment, just different locations in the apartment. I've had to move them around.
Okay. And the basement, is that something anybody has access to?
No, well, the tenants have access to it because we each have a key,
Okay.
because it's padlocked, but it's not anything that we use or use to store anything or.
Welcome, everyone.
Okay. And I said I'd get to the tools, so I'll get to the tools first. I'm going to show you what has been marked as Exhibit H. Okay. Do you recognize what kind of tool this is?
That's a miter saw.
And that's one of the tools that you have, right?
Yes.
And did you say that you had a circular saw?
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to show you a copy of I. Can you tell me what kind of tool is in this image?
That is a circular saw.
Okay. I'm going to show the jury. Now, I want to get a little bit of an understanding of your place and where Kayla, Adam, and the kids stayed. Were they in your apartment?
Yes,
Did you have an extra spare room for them?
not for them. That was packed full with furniture flipping and tools.
Okay. So it was a room that you had available that you let them use for a while, but it wasn't a room that you had intended for them.
They didn't really use the room. They just put their items in there, their clothes in there, and they slept on the pull-out couch in the living room.
Okay. All right. So all the kids are, and the family is all together.
Mhm.
Okay. So just to get a better idea, and the jury too, of your house, you're on the first floor,
Yes,
and if you're on Dubuque Street, if you look at the right side of the building, but facing Dubuque Street is a door.
yes,
And then you've got a arched window beside that door.
yes,
And then on the other side, there's a sidewalk that goes along the side.
yes,
And I think that you said that there was a door in the middle of the building along that sidewalk.
yes,
And then in the back of the building, there's another door.
yes.
And you use the front door?
No,
You use the side door along the sidewalk?
no,
You use the back door?
yes,
Okay, and that park there?
yes,
Okay, so you drive around back of the building, you park, and you can come in the back way.
yes.
Do you have the whole downstairs?
The whole floor, yes,
Okay, so any door that you go in, you can access your place.
yes.
You don't necessarily, but
Right.
you can. So the middle door, where did you say that Adam and Kayla and the kids would go in?
The middle door.
The middle door along the sidewalk?
Mhm.
Okay. And the front door would be for tenants going upstairs or something?
They would use the middle door.
Okay. Front door was for show?
Front door, you go out and get your mail.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And now I want to talk about when you met Harmony. And you recall that visit, right?
Yes.
And you even recalled what she was wearing, right?
No, I don't recall what she was wearing.
Okay, I'm going to show you a copy of a report that I believe that you were given to review prior to your testimony. And do you remember meeting with the state about your prior testimony?
Yes.
And you reviewed the report that they asked you to review?
I remember reviewing it, yes.
Okay, and you said that it was accurate?
Yes.
Okay. If I show you a copy of that report, will that help refresh your recollection of if at some point you
I was
remembered what she
muted.
wearing?
Yes.
It's been a chaotic couple of years, huh?
Yes.
I was talking away and I was muted. Oh my God. I don't know who this woman is. I want to say maybe Kayla's mother, but I'm not sure. I'll find out.
Okay, okay. So, I'm going to show you a copy of that page 165 that they gave you. And you can read any of this report about you, but I'm going to ask specifically about what
Okay.
you told them there.
I tried to pin the comment and it says I cannot put user in timeout. I guess I hit the wrong button. That's funny. Cannot ban a
Okay,
chat
I just read
owner.
that part.
Okay.
Oh my
And
God.
do you recall that you remembered then that she was wearing a pink jacket?
So I don't really remember what she was wearing, like visually. I remember this. I remember everything else in there, but I don't really remember a fuzzy coat. It
Okay.
doesn't say anything about pink.
And pigtails?
Yes, I remember the pigtails
Okay. And glasses?
and glasses.
Poor
and
Harmony.
you remember that because you were paying attention to her, right?
She was next to me in the living room.
Okay. So you were able to see her face.
Yes.
How's the
and She
volume?
was adorable.
Yes.
And you enjoyed
I can
meeting
turn the
her
volume
and
up.
trying to get to know her.
She didn't talk much, and they were there very briefly.
Okay. And I believe that you said she looked healthy?
Yes, she did.
Okay. And she was pleasant, didn't talk much, but seemed fine.
She seemed fine, yes.
Okay. Thank you. No, I'm sorry, no further questions.
I did not catch who that was. They just had the drug dealer on before the last break.
Apologize, Your Honors.
Boy, to me it seemed like they were trying to blame him for something. Well, he did do something wrong by dealing the drugs, in my opinion.
You said this is a grinder, Exhibit 63.
Mm-hmm.
So, I believe you said you did not own this.
No, I do not have a grinder.
So.
Oh yeah, I think that's
having one
Kayla's
on the
mother.
backside there.
Never.
So if somebody saw one new in a box, it wasn't yours?
No. No.
Yep.
No further questions.
Kayla had testified that she believed her mother had a grinder like that.
No, Your Honor.
They're trying to catch, I believe prosecution is trying to catch Kayla in a lie because she was already caught lying in the grand jury. And now they're trying to catch her in another lie.
Sit down.
In my opinion, allegedly. I saw Dolly on here yesterday. He was in the audience, Dolly Vision. That was funny. He gave the peace sign. Dolly. I don't know if he's still out there. Anyway, this is such a sad, sad case.
I'll say, thank
Terrible.
you. At this point, the state will call criminalist Katie Swango to the stand, please.
Katie Swango on the stand. Don't know who that is.
Sorry, Ms. Swango, for the courts, I apologize. Thank you very much for being here. If you would please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you give this jury will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you. Please feel free to have a seat. And as we're being recorded here today, would you please go ahead, state your full name, and spell both your first and last name
Is
for
that
the
too
record?
loud?
Katie Lynn Swango. Katie, Katie, Swango, Swango.
If anybody could let me know how the volume is on the YouTube. I had it up all the way. I think it's too loud. I put it down to about 75.
Thank you very much. And Ms. Swango, where are you currently employed?
I work for the New Hampshire State Police in the Forensic Laboratory.
How long have you worked for them?
Next month will be 16 years.
16 years.
Yes.
Okay. Where did you first begin work as a criminalist?
I worked at the California Department of Justice in Richmond, California in their laboratory.
How long did you work out in California?
Just over 6 years, I think it was. 6 years and a couple months.
6 years and a couple months. Okay. What did you specialize in when you were working in California?
So when I started there, I was actually working in their method development unit, but the whole lab that I worked in was all still forensic DNA. But I was in method development, which is just testing methods to see if you can do things faster, cheaper, better than whatever the caseworkers are doing then. And then I entered a training program to be an actual forensic DNA case analyst. When that was over, I was an analyst for about a year there before I moved to New Hampshire.
And when you moved to New Hampshire, and I take it at that point, did you start working for New Hampshire State Police Forensic Laboratory? Was that your first job when moving into New Hampshire?
Yes, I moved here specifically for the job.
And what position did you start at for them?
The same position I'm in right now, a criminalist too.
So with regards to that, what unit do you work in inside the State Police Forensic Lab?
Forensic biology.
And could you just please, for a brief moment, explain to the jury what the different units are at the State Police Forensic Lab?
Sure. So the lab has a lot of different services that we offer. So there's fingerprints, there's controlled drugs, there's toxicology, there's digital evidence. So there are many different sections, one of them being the forensic biology unit.
And what sort of background do you have to have in training? First of all, let's talk about education, I guess. What kind of education do you have to work as a criminalist too, and to work in the forensic biology unit?
So to work in the lab in general, you have to have a bachelor's of science degree. But to be in DNA specifically, to be an analyst in the U.S., to be a DNA analyst.
This should be interesting. I want to learn more about DNA. I don't understand it too much.
You need to have specific classes on top of a Bachelor of Science degree, and the Bachelor of Science has to be in a science, chemistry, biology, forensic science, something like that. But the classes that you have to have specifically for DNA is you have to have microbiology or molecular biology, you have to have statistics, genetics, and biochemistry.
So for your own educational degrees, I take it you obviously meet the bachelor's requirement, but what other degrees do you have?
Right. I also have a PhD in human genetics.
I'm sorry, in what?
Human genetics.
Okay. Sorry, I'm trying to stand close to the microphone myself, so if you could just scoot in a little bit close to the microphone, I appreciate that. And what are some of your current duties inside the unit? What do you do right now for them?
So I am a DNA analyst for the casework. So that means that I will do DNA cases. I also work, or or am trained to work in another section of the forensic biology unit, which we call serology. That is identifying body fluids on evidence. So I work in those two sections within the unit. I write my own reports, I review other people's work, I train other people, and I go to court.
Okay. So I take it then that your duties do include the analysis and the comparison of different DNA samples.
Yes.
Could you please describe, I believe you talked a little bit about some of the additional training that you need and qualifications, but what sort of training and qualifications did you gain to be able to make those comparisons between different DNA samples?
So that's all part of when you're training to be a caseworker, both back when I was in California as well as here. That's we take classes, you have on-the-job training, and that's all teaching you how to follow the guidelines that are recommended for DNA testing in the U.S.
Do you have any continuing education requirements once you get your degrees? Do you have to keep doing other coursework to be certified?
Yes, to remain an analyst in the U.S., you have to have a minimum of 8 hours of continuing education every year that's specific to DNA. Generally, we go to conferences, so it's a couple days. It's not just the 8 hours, but it can be just 8 hours, but it's a minimum of 8 hours a year.
So between your 7 years in California and your 13 years here in New Hampshire, when you add those together, how many DNA profiles would you say that you've analyzed over your career so far?
Thousands.
Just thousands.
Right. I don't have a specific number, but thousands of samples.
Have you ever been qualified in court as an expert in the area of DNA analysis and testing?
Yes, I have.
About how many times?
Around 40.
And with regards to those qualifications of those, being qualified as an expert, has that occurred here in the state of New Hampshire?
Yes, most of the times. I think only 2 were in California, so around 38 times here.
38 times here in New Hampshire?
Yes.
And does that include here in Hillsborough County in the Northern District?
Yes.
At this point, Your Honor, we would ask that Criminal Swango be qualified as an expert in the field of DNA analysis.
I have no objection to her giving her opinion.
I find her so qualified.
Thank you, Your Honor. So, Criminal Swango, if you could explain a little bit about DNA. Everybody's seen a lot of things on TV and the news, but courtroom is not necessarily like they put things on TV or in the news. TV or in movies. Can you just explain for us what is DNA? Where does it come from? And how does it play a role in your work?
So DNA is what we kind of hear as the blueprint of our bodies. It's what makes us a human instead of an animal or a plant or something like that. We get our DNA from half from your mom, half from your dad. We can find it in any cell in your body except a red blood cell. Everybody has different DNA in their body, except identical twins. So if there's an identical twin, they'll have identical DNA, but everyone else will have a different profile. As I said, it's in all the cells in your body, which is why it's helpful in a case like this, or not just this kind of case, but forensics in general, because everybody's profile is unique except identical twins. If we can find a body fluid or cells from a person, we can identify who that's from, usually.
If I could ask a quick follow-up to that, you stated that DNA cannot be found inside red blood cells. So how is it then that DNA can be found in a blood sample from somebody or a blood swab, even if it's not in the red blood cells themselves?
Because there's a lot of other cells in your blood. So blood isn't just red blood cells. It's got platelets, it's got white blood cells, and other components of your floating around in your blood. So yes, if we were swabbing literally just red blood cells, we wouldn't necessarily get a profile. But we're not. That we're getting the whole component of the blood, and that's what we're getting the DNA from.
This has always been so confusing to me, the DNA. I wish I understood it more.
What part of the DNA do you look at when you're going to go ahead and kind of process and develop a DNA profile?
So we're looking at, so every cell has a nucleus inside, and that is the DNA that we're looking at, the DNA in the nucleus. We're not sequencing. We're not sequencing your DNA. We're not trying to get like all of your DNA. We're looking at certain regions of the DNA that scientists have found are not linked to any certain diseases or anything. So we can't look at the profile and know what someone looks like. We can't tell if they have some sort of medical history. We can't tell anything like that. These are just parts of the DNA that for some reason that we don't know, through time have developed such that they're different from person to person, but they don't have some sort of, they don't actually cause anything in particular. They don't cause anything to be wrong with people necessarily. It's just that they're different from person to person.
What's the purpose then of comparing DNA? I mean, how is it really used in forensic work?
So we will get DNA from an item of evidence at a scene, and that's where we get one profile from. And then to know whose it is, we have to have known samples from people that they think might be players in.
In my opinion, jurors should have to take a class on DNA so they completely understand it. I think that's a huge part of a case.
The scene. And we would take the profile from each person, we would look at them side by side, and you can just look down in like a tabular format at the profiles to tell if they match or if they're similar and could be from the same person. And then we have to tell them how strong of a match that is, or how close those profiles could be. And so we do a statistic to provide that information as well.
So, and I want to make sure I'm getting it right. So you can develop a profile of an individual, either something that's not known. So, for example, a DNA that's found in a location, maybe on a podium, and then compare that to a known profile of somebody from a known sample. How do you get those known samples?
They have to be submitted by the police department.
Okay. If you were to take a known sample from me right now, what are some of the different ways that you could do that?
The way that is easiest and what usually we do is we take what's called a buccal swab. So it's just a long swab on a stick. So it's kind of like a Q-tip, but whereas a Q-tip is double-ended, it's just got one end that's cotton and it's got a long stick, maybe about 6 inches long. We would swab the inside of your mouth or give it to you to swab the inside of your mouth. And that's what we would collect, and it's called a buccal swab.
Could you also be able to develop a profile from somebody's blood if you know whose blood it is?
Absolutely. That used to be what people did, is you'd have to have a phlebotomist, and it's a lot more invasive for a person, so it's just easier to get the buccal swabs. But we could get it from any body fluid if they know it's from a certain person because they can see it being collected from that person, we could use it. It's just the buccal swab is easiest.
As long as it has cells from a person, I take it.
Yes.
Okay. Did you conduct any DNA analysis in this case, either of something where you didn't know who it was from at the beginning or whether it was a known profile, you knew who provided the sample?
I did.
Okay. And what known DNA samples did you have for this case? What are the knowns that you were working with?
I had 2 known samples. I believe they were both buccal swabs. One was from Adam Montgomery and one was from Crystal Sorey.
So one from an Adam Montgomery and one from Crystal Sorey.
Yes.
Okay. Did you obtain a profile for Miss Sorey from the known swab that you had?
Yes.
And did you obtain a profile for Adam Montgomery from the swab that you had?
Yes.
Were you, from looking at those two, you now had 2 fully known profiles. So if I were to put these 2 side by side, I take it they would not look similar to one another.
No, they wouldn't, because as we said, everybody is going to have a different profile.
How many pieces of evidence did you then compare to the known profiles that you had for Crystal Sorey and for Adam Montgomery?
I would have to check my reports. I don't think I ended up with that. I had at least one, but I don't know if I had more than one. I don't believe I had more than one to compare with either of them.
The reports that you wrote in this particular case, I want to make sure that I have an understanding. Did you do a report on January 19th of 2022, February 21st of 2020, January 29th of 2022, apologize. Let me get these in order. January 1st of 2022, February 1st of 2022, February 21st of 2023, and June 29th of 2022.
Those.
Better
I know I
yet.
wrote several reports. I would have to see them to know if those are the correct dates.
And so, if I may approach, Your Honor.
So I don't know how long the trial's going to last. I think it can last up to a couple weeks, right? DNA specialist Katie Swang on stand.
And let me ask you, when you said you've done thousands of these analyses,
I hate it when they don't move the microphone.
with regards to reports that you write,
Get in front of
about
it.
how many reports do you write per year?
I'd say maybe 60 a year,
60.
something like that.
And do you review other people's reports as well for accuracy?
I do.
I'm going to show you a
Terrible
series of
audio.
documents that I've shown defense counsel. I apologize.
Terrible audio. I don't know why they don't give them wireless mics.
I'll go ahead and let you take a look over it and just let me know when you're done.
Yes, they all look like my reports, and
Sorry.
that
Sorry about the audio on the court TV. It keeps going up and down.
from looking at the items, that looks like the right number of reports as well.
With regards to those items, I'm going to have you hold on to those just for right now. Feel free to turn them upside down if you would, and just to refresh your recollection with regards to specifics on this case, just let us know.
Okay.
We'll be able to do that either myself or defense counsel.
Okay.
Specifically, one of the things that I would like to ask you is with regards to the number of, you had these two known profiles, one for Crystal Sorey, one for Adam Montgomery, but the number of different things that you compared those to, your unknowns, if you were. I'm wondering if you could tell us how many different swabs or cuttings or items that you compared your two knowns to.
As I said, I know that there was one item that I compared them both to and was able to provide statistics.
Okay.
I did not actually get comparable profiles for most of the other items that I tested.
And let's talk about that. When you say comparable profiles for the other items that you tested, from those other items, what were their test results?
So a lot of the items that I got, there wasn't enough DNA, so it was below the level of detection in our methods, or there was at least one that had DNA from more than 2 people. We don't have methods in our lab to look at mixtures of more than 2 people, so that was something again that I couldn't compare to anyone. And sometimes there's DNA there, it's detected, but there's not enough that would, so for us to make a comparison, the profile has to be of a certain quality. And so we would get the profile, we would look at it, we would do a statistic on the profile to see how rare or common it would be in the population. If it doesn't meet a certain threshold, we say that it just isn't able to be compared. It's too little DNA to compare to anybody. And so that's what happened with most of the samples that I tested in this case, unfortunately.
So if I'm understanding that clearly, so most of the samples that you did test, there just either wasn't enough there or it didn't meet enough thresholds that you can definitively say, haha, I've got a DNA profile here.
Correct. That's following our protocols in the laboratory. That's how most of them panned out in this case, yes.
And what to generate those profiles, even in the one item that you said that you could, or the ones that you couldn't, what are the 4 steps that you go through to basically get and try to create a DNA profile from a swab or from an item?
Okay. So I'm not, and we don't create them. Creating makes it sound like
I
we're making
apologize.
them.
To be able to see if there's sufficient information there to generate a profile, not generate, excuse me. I want to make sure I'm using your language. You tell us the right words to
Okay.
say.
So the first step that we have is we're going to take our item of evidence and cut a piece into a tube, and we're going to put some buffers and chemicals in there, and we're going to try to break apart the cells. And the purpose of that is to get the DNA out of the cell, because we can't do anything with it if it's still within the cells. And that step is called extraction. We're extracting the DNA, just like you would extract juice or anything else that you would have an extract. So we're going to extract the DNA out of the cells. Then once you have the DNA, we need to figure out how much we have, because we've, through validations, looked at our methods, and we know how much DNA is ideal for our downstream. So if we have too much DNA, our equipment isn't going to work properly. If we don't have enough DNA, it's not going to give an ideal profile. We might not get any profile. So we need to know about how much DNA we have so that we can decide if we have to dilute it before we go on, because we don't want to have too much that it doesn't work. And of course, if we have methods online, or depending upon how we do our extraction, if we need to concentrate a sample.
It's not good when they get a very small sample and they can only test it once and then the sample has to be destroyed.
And if that's possible. So our next step then is figuring out how much DNA we have, and that is called quantitation. We're figuring out the quantity, so quantitation. The next step is amplification. So that's where we're going to make lots of copies of the pieces of DNA that we're interested in. Again, I said we're not sequencing your whole genome. We're just taking specific locations of the DNA. As I said, these ones that scientists have found are different from person to person, but they don't cause any sort of diseases, or they can't tell if you wear glasses or not, or anything like that. So we're just going to make copies of these specific pieces of DNA, and that's called amplification. We're amplifying it, making more of it. The next step is when we run it on our instrument, which is called a genetic analyzer. So we would take our DNA, we put it on the genetic analyzer, the samples run through it, and the data is collected by a laser, and it's just colored light is what the instrument sees. It sees colored light coming off at different times. But if I just look at that data, it's just colored light at different times. And a human can't really make anything out of it. So of course we need a computer software that can take that information and make it something that we can use in some way. The way that it does that is what it comes off of, something that I would see is
So complicated.
you kind of say it looks kind of like a graph with a bunch of hills and peaks and valleys, and we call that an electropharogram. And that is what we would look at to determine a DNA profile, because the software is going to compare the peaks and valleys and the different colors with knowns that come from the company to tell us if you see a blue peak at this time, at this size, this is going to be this. This was what the number would be for that part of the profile. If you see a red peak at this time, it's going to be this number in the profile. And that's how we end up making a table from our hills and valleys, and making a table of what that person's profile is going to be. Even if we don't know who it is, we know that that came from a person and that's their profile. And then we would do that with each item and compare them.
And so if I can ask, you said before you had 2 known samples. Is that the same process that you put the 2 known samples through, the one for Crystal Soria and the one for Adam Montgomery?
Exactly, yes.
So from that you've developed, or you were able to see a table of what their DNA makeup was with regards to the standards and the protocols that you would ordinarily follow in the lab. Again, like you said, we're not sequencing somebody's entire genome here.
That's correct.
And did you have a known sample for Harmony Montgomery?
I did not.
The one item you said before that you were able to but be able to discover and see that there was a profile there. Do you remember what that item was?
It was a toothbrush.
Okay. And specifically, do you remember, did you look at the toothbrush itself?
Yes.
Okay.
I believe it was a Trolls toothbrush.
show you what's been marked State's Exhibit 66. Do you recognize that?
I recognize that to some degree, but mostly I can recognize the packaging because it has my initials and the date that I went into the bag on the outside of the package. So I can see my initials and the date that I opened it the first time and the date I opened it a second time.
So is this the Trolls toothbrush that you have?
It is.
When you put this sample, how did you collect the sample from the toothbrush?
I just cut some of the bristles off into my tube.
And from that, did you put it through the same sequence that you just described for us?
I did.
Okay. And with regards to that particular profile that you were able to see from that toothbrush, what were you able to conclude after you were looking at that profile in comparison with your two known profiles of Crystal Sorey and Adam Montgomery?
So remember we said half your DNA is from mom and half is from dad. So I could look at that profile as compared to both Crystal's and Adam's, and I could tell what part came from Crystal and what part came from Adam, and everything lined up perfectly as if that could have been from a child made by those two people.
And specifically with regards to the child, could you tell what the gender of the child would be?
It was female.
At the time that you did this, did you know or not know that Crystal Sorey has only had one biological child that's a female?
I did not know that at the time.
And with regards, did you know or did you not
I wonder why the toothbrush is so relevant. This is like the third time they talked about it so far.
know that Crystal Sorey only had one biological child with Adam Montgomery?
I didn't know that either.
With regards to making this comparison and being able to look at this, you stated before that you're able to come up with a probability or a certainty, or what's the right term to use?
We call it a probability. We would say the words are, it's more likely. It's however times more likely that it came from two people than as if it didn't come from those and it came from a random person.
So are you able to, or the probability, what is the probability that there is some other female out there unrelated to a child of Crystal Sorey and Adam Montgomery having a matching DNA for the DNA profile that you saw on that toothbrush?
I feel like that's a statistic that maybe is possible, but I didn't run that. So
1 in a billion?
I know that if I could could I look at that last report that had the statistic?
If you
actually
could,
in it?
please, yes. And
It's the June 29th report,
29th,
2022.
And with regards to page 7280, if you give up the second page of the report.
Yes.
I don't see how they moved this child for 2 years. Unbelievable.
So, the statistic, once I looked at the profile of the toothbrush and compared it with both Crystal and Adam, the statistic was that it was at least 100 sextillion, so that's a lot of zeros. I think
21, sound
21,
about right?
something like that. I would have to write that down. More likely to see these genetic results if the profile of the toothbrush was a biological child of Adam Montgomery and Crystal Sorey than if it was two unrelated people.
So it's that much more likely that it's from a biological child of Adam Montgomery and Crystal Sorey than
Some random people.
random people. And that's 100 sextillion?
Yes.
So practically speaking, from looking at this, without being able to say, of course, that this is in fact Harmony Montgomery's profile, it's 100 sextillion more likely her profile than anybody else.
Right. If they have one child or one female child, then that would be my next step in saying that makes sense, right?
If they had one female
If
child.
they had one female child,
Right.
yes.
Which you didn't know at the time that you did this testing, right?
Correct.
Your Honor, if we can approach.
This woman has been on for 40 minutes now, and I don't know why the toothbrush is so relevant.
All right, ladies and gentlemen,
Are they going to take a break?
we are going to break for the
Oh,
day.
jeez.
We'll resume tomorrow morning at 9 a.m., so please be here at 8:45. I'm just going to ask you, ma'am, to stay seated. I remind you, don't discuss the case with each other or with anybody else. Don't do any independent research. Don't look up any law or terms that you've heard. Don't do any scientific research. Your verdict must be based exclusively on the evidence that you hear.
Thank you all for joining me. I'll be doing many more lives. I'm going to have open panel also. So stay tuned and thank you for tuning in today. Please consider like and subscribing. Thank you. Bye now.